Cleveland Guardians select Travis Bazzana.
Wow. Williams goes back, and he's gone! A cycle for Christian Moore! Struck him out! From last four in to last team standing, Ole Miss!
It's a deep drive down the right field line. That ball is gone! LSU wins the College World Series!
All right, here we go. Draft and develop. Kind of another maiden voyage here, Joe. With Joe Doyle, I'm Jason Churchill. This is Draft and Develop, a reimagining, if you will, of the FSS Plus podcast. We're here today to kind of tell you what the show is going to be about and kind of what it's not going to be about. And then we're going to show you what it's going to be about. And before we do that, Joe, here we are in January and the world of baseball, you know, the world of baseball that we are all about, both at FSS Plus, futurestarseries.com and here at Draft and Develop. That's kind of the buzz right now. You get the international free agent signings getting going earlier this week. The college season's getting going. I know JUCO, they started practice, I believe, on the 10th. Yep. It really never stops in this world. If you bounce around between the pros and the amateur game, you know, so even when all the big league stuff kind of slows down, there's so much going on below the majors, isn't there?
Yeah, man, pretty good time of year. Before we reflect on what's going on, can we just take a second to talk about you and I are podcasting again together?
Hey, how about that? Yeah,
dude, it's been a minute. There's not a lot of people in this baseball space that I think like-minded. You and I are both very logical people. We're not reactionary people, and I enjoy podcasting with you. So I'm looking forward to doing this more often. In terms of the baseball space, good time of year, man. We got high school baseball starting up in Florida and California this weekend. The MLK tournament taking place at J. Sarah this weekend. Area Code Select West is taking place in Los Angeles in a couple weeks. I'll be down there. And then, you know, we're a month out from college baseball kicking off. Those practices get going in haste here soon. The international free agent signing period was this week. Yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to kind of talking ball again. The cold, dark winter months are almost behind us.
January for the amateur game kind of feels like March does for the pro game. You know, you get that spring training sort of time, practices kicking off. That's what it feels. And then, you know, with Major League Baseball pushing the international signing date back from July, you know, instead of up to January of the same year, it's the January of the following year. So we get a lot of activity, you know, this time of year. So that's been really interesting. And obviously the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes there kind of ties in the big league clubs, but that's thrown a little,
by the way.
I hate it. I don't think Roki Sasaki,
not the Sasaki thing. Do you like that COVID more or less pushed international signings to January? You don't.
No, I don't.
I like it a lot.
I don't. But the worst thing about the process does have to do, it's not Roki Sasaki's fault, but I look at it this way. You think about a player like, you know, think about a young pitcher. Think about Garrett Crochet. Okay. Really good pitcher. Just traded the Boston Red Sox for a big package of prospects from the White Sox. He's got to get in his 6 years before he gets to pick his team, right? Roki Sasaki gets to pick his team before he's ever stepped foot on a major league field and done anything for a major league club. It's ridiculous.
It doesn't going to make any money.
Well, not yet. But he's not going to make any baseball money. You know what he's going to go to LA, or even if he goes to San Diego, he's going to go there and he's going to make a rat ton of money, but he gets to pick his team. He gets to pick his situation. It's garbage, absolute garbage. Crochet had to get drafted. He had to stay in Chicago of all places. Like, I don't like that setup whatsoever. And the thing with Sasaki is, yeah, he's not going to get a big bonus, but it's essentially like a draft size bonus. He's going to get 5 million, 6, whatever it is, right? And then he's going to make a major league salary pretty much right away. That doesn't happen with kids that come through the draft, right? I just don't like that setup. Figure out something different. I'm not trying to pick on Sasaki. It's not his fault. It's Major League Baseball's fault. And the fact that there's been at least, is it just one so far? One international player that was impacted by the Dodgers thinking they got a great shot to get.
And 3 now.
3 total now. So now those players got to go somewhere else. Garbage, absolute trash the way this is set up. I mean, absolute garbage.
I mean,
the way
the counter argument would be all 3 players that the Dodgers quote unquote dumped ended up getting more money with another team because other teams just had more money to spend.
I
Now,
mean,
granted,
that's
they
great, but
did.
what about the
I'm sure those
uncertainty?
teams didn't want to go to Chicago and Pittsburgh per
Sure.
se. They wanted to be Dodgers,
Yeah.
but
But what if
I
it's not the
understand where
Dodgers we're
you're coming
talking about?
from.
What if it's not the Dodgers? Because everybody's like, I'm not going to feel sorry for the Dodgers, right? Because nobody should feel sorry for the Dodgers. But what if this was the Pirates or the Brewers, and they had a shot at this Japanese player coming over, right? Now they got to kind of dump these other players like that. That's counter to what the whole point of international
Sure,
amateur free agency is. There has to
but
be a different level and a
don't you
different set
think
of
Roki
rules.
Sasaki is more of an outlier? I mean, we haven't seen this
He
happen.
is, yeah. I mean, he is, but if even if this is going to happen like once every 5 years, it's too much. It's too much. I mean, it was Otani in 2018, right before the
Yeah,
2018 season,
yeah,
I guess 6 or 7 years. But it's not going to start happening less. It's going to start happening more. You're going to get more players do what Sasaki did because he's going to, again, Otani kind of laid the groundwork, and now Sasaki's going to come over. Because if you wait until you're
yeah,
free, you're 27, 28, 29
right.
years old, and you're not getting the big dollars. Now Sasaki's lined up in 3 years to get a huge extension from wherever he goes, right?
Yeah.
So
It would be nice if this landscape turned into kind of what Rintaro Sasaki did, where Major League Baseball and college baseball in the States becomes more appealing than the MPB draft, and we just get more international stars in the American Collegiate Athletic industry. That would be fun, and
yeah.
it would almost melt together the international free agent period, at least from an Asian
Mhm,
American perspective, and just the domestic crop of talent that we already
mhm.
have. It would be really, really, really cool if we
It
were
would.
seeing
In the
4, 5,
meantime,
6.
all it takes is Major League Baseball waving a wand, and Roki Sasaki is dealing with a different situation. Maybe the limits are the same, but it shouldn't come out of the same pool. You know what I mean? It shouldn't come out of the same pool as these 16, 17-year-old kids in the Dominican Republic or Venezuela. That's just garbage to me, man. Like it's good that
Yeah,
those guys got more money. It's that part is good. But if this continues to happen, I mean, that's not always going to be the case, right?
no,
It's not always going to be the
I,
case.
I I agree with you to a certain extent. You would like to see if especially if a rich team like the Dodgers or the Padres or anybody else in that the Mets, anybody else
Mhm,
in that atmosphere gets to capitalize on this sort of outlier player, you would like
mhm.
to see them have to spend the money equivalent to the talent level that that player is. But
Sure. Yeah.
that's just that's where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like it. And then the Garrett Crochets and the Logan Gilberts of the world are sitting here, going through like maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe Crochet didn't want to be there. He didn't have a choice. Sasaki's got a choice. I
I
mean, it's
mean, I
terrible,
think you and I there's a lot of things wrong with Major League Baseball, but I think you and I are both of the belief that control years should fall from 6 to at least 5. I mean,
Yeah.
how many careers are killed because they're becoming free agents at 32 instead of 31? You know how many players would get another shot if they were 31 instead of 32?
Mhm.
It's a big list.
Well,
Uh,
Major League Baseball's own data tells them the difference between 30 and 31 is about the same differences between 26 and 29
yep.
in terms of like injuries and
Runs a bat
availability and
speed.
production and how quickly exactly. And we're going to be able to track that now, which is fun. We have a year of bat tracking to track. What's interesting is bat speed isn't automatic, and we're seeing a lot of people out there saying, "Man, this guy is like 97th percentile bat speed. Why is he terrible?" Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that here on Draft and Develop over time. All right, so here's what this show is going to be about. And what's missing in the following list of maybe 6 things is what it's not going to be about. We're going to talk about the draft. Therefore, we're going to talk about college baseball. We're going to talk about prep baseball. We're going to talk about college baseball separate from the draft a little bit too. We're going to talk a little bit about high school baseball that's a little separate from the draft because we want to talk about things like scouting and player development from kids that are 14, 15 years old on up. But scouting and player development, minor league baseball, even as well, is going to be a big thing on this show. Essentially anything and everything except MLB level news and results. That's what we're going to talk about. Hence the name Draft and Develop. We're going to kind of slow walk into this though. We're going to convene once a month for the time being. And after today, we're going to do so with a guest to talk about the draft or college baseball or prep baseball or minor league baseball or a player, scouting, player development, things like that. We may talk to people about, I'd love to talk about people. This is definitely in the plans. Let's talk to people, Joe, that train pitchers. Let's talk to people that train hitters of all ages. Let's talk to coaches. Let's talk to players themselves. That's what we want to make this show. That's what we're going to turn the show into. This will be available to FSS Plus subscribers only after today. So if you're not yet a subscriber, you are in luck. Got a little present for you. Through the end of the month, through the end of January, you can get 25% off an annual subscription by entering coupon code DRAFT25. All lowercase, all one word, no spaces, DRAFT25. Make sure you choose the annual option, which is already 2 free months. You can go to t.ly/FSS Plus to get there. Choose the annual option, click the little link to enter a coupon code, and put in DRAFT25 through the end of January. So you have 2 weeks to take advantage of that. With that subscription, you obviously get every episode of Draft and Develop, but you get all of our draft and prospects coverage. So if you like what Joe does with his draft boards and his rankings and his scouting reports, that's how you get it. It's an incredibly, Joe, it's cheap. I'm just going to say that. It's cheap to get in here. We've looked around, we've seen, we've analyzed. It's cheap to get in, and it's not always going to be this cheap. And now's your chance to get it even cheaper. Pretty good deal. You going to jump on this deal, Joe, by the way, yourself, so you can read your own stuff? I mean, thinking about it, you're going to consider it?
I'm privy to a back door.
Okay.
But yeah, dude, it's like kind of bouncing off what you said and compared to other sites that have a paywall. Listen, time doesn't come free, and the content that we put out it takes a lot of work. And I think for bang for your buck, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck here.
Yeah. And here's your chance to get in for the entire, the next year for 25% off as well. So it's $5 a month, $50 a year. You can get 25% off. Yep.
You get 2 months off to start. So that's another, 18% off, you could argue. Yeah, man, it's a killer deal.
Yeah, we like it. And what's really fun is we have control over it. So when Joe comes up with an idea, we do it. When I have an idea, we do it. There's nobody looking over our shoulders here. We want to give away stuff. We give away stuff. When we want to double charge someone because we think they're an ass, we're going to do that, Joe. No, we're not going to. That's the one thing we're not going to do. I'm not even sure I could do that if it was possible. All right, let's actually talk a little baseball here, shall we? I wanted to talk kind of, centric draft stuff because we're a month or so away from the D1 season. And that's kind of as much as it can be, kind of the official start of draft season, so to speak. I mean, about 75-80% of the players that are drafted are college players, and a very large percentage of those are D1 players. So it's a good time as any to kind of think big picture here with the class of 2025. And I know you get a lot of questions about the class this time of year. I know you have a few things you want to make sure you get out to here in a few minutes. But I have a couple of questions of you really quick. We're 6 months from draft day. And I think that's the problem in this conversation. It's a good problem, though. It's a problem that pushes discussion and pushes question and opinion and analysis, and that's why we're here. But the question I keep getting is, because you get the Nats at number 1, you get the Angels at number 2, you get the Mariners at number 3. None of those. I mean, the Nats, yes, but the Angels, they haven't drafted this high in a while. The Mariners haven't drafted this high in a while. So the question I get a lot is, hey, this is going to be great. The Angels are going to get Jamie Arnold or Bremner at UCSB or Laviolette from Texas A&M. And it's like, because those are the top 3 players, on your board right now and on a lot of people's boards right now. But that's not really necessarily the way it works. We're 6 months out. So I'm thinking about it this way. In addition to the bonus pools and the manipulation of them and how that sometimes alters the best player available approach to all of this, how different might the top 5 or so look in July versus right now? Like, how many of your current top 5, maybe if you have it in front of you, like what is your current top 5 and how different, could that look? Are there some that are pretty much, unless they get hurt, going to be automatic top 5 picks? Again, throwing the money part out the window, or, how different could this be?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And it makes me reflect on, the 2021 draft where we saw, I believe that was the Henry Davis year. where he was, Henry Davis was, 18 to 30 on most people's boards in January or February, and then he went 1.
Mm.
It reminds me of um, it reminds me of 2022. I mean, Jackson Holiday was a comp A pick for most people
Mhm.
at this time of the year, and he ends up going number 1. I think that's probably going to be the case this year. There's not a stalwart, franchise altering player at the top, at least as things are right now. That can always change. But I would expect the one guy that I feel confidence in the top 5 is Tyler Bremner. I think he is the highest floor, best option to be the number 1 college pitcher off the board this year. If I was to bet on anyone, I could see Laviolette going outside of the top 5. I could see, let's see, who do I have right now? And this is a little bit different than the 250 that I've posted, because things are fluid. But I have
Mhm.
Laviolette 1, Bremner 2, Arnold 3, Iva Arquette 4, and I actually have Billy Carlson, the high school
Mhm.
shortstop, at 5.
Mhm.
I think any of those players could fall out of the top 15. None of them have shown, roll
It's
6
quite amazing
tendencies.
what can happen during the spring, whether it be
A
performance
ton.
or there's an injury or they just show some sort of a weakness, like somebody has trouble, throwing the curveball for strikes, or, it's a high school hitter that's not hitting breaking stuff or something. It could be anything that
Or
pushes them out.
injury.
Mhm.
I mean, the one
That's
thing
obviously
that,
the big
I
one.
bring up with Jamie Arnold, he's a crossbody lefty.
Mhm.
Sometimes that works, with Garrett Crochet and with Chris Sale, and sometimes it doesn't
Is
with
he
Danny
not just the
Holton and
Tim
Ryan
Lincecum
Rolston.
of this draft? Is he not just a Tim? Because it's like we don't exactly know how to treat him. We don't
Yeah,
exactly know what conclusions we can come to at this point because he's not the biggest guy in the world. I mean, it's not exactly Tim Lincecum. It's righty lefty.
sure.
Arnold's bigger than Lincecum. They're the Scott Kasmers of the world that we can kind of throw out there as similar arms. But a lot of those, Dontrell Willis, I hear that being thrown out
And
as
it's
well.
unorthodox,
Yeah, those guys
and a lot
don't
of teams
necessarily
don't
have
like
long
that.
careers. I think
A
that's
lot
the
of teams
key.
don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, where did Lincecum go? I feel like he went like 9, but I think I'm wrong.
Yeah, he was outside the top 7 or 8. Yeah. That
Yeah,
was
so
that '06?
I think it was before that. I think it was like '04.
No, it was after '04. I'm gonna pull it up right now.
But in
Um,
any case, teams
yeah, that
generally don't
year he
like
went 10 to the Giants. That was the
10.
Luke Hochevar year. It went Hochevar to the Royals, Greg Reynolds to the Rockies, and then Evan
Yeah.
Longoria to the Rays. That was the Andrew Miller year where a lot of people thought he was probably the best player on the board. And then he ended up going 6 to the Tigers and turning into more of a reliever than anything. Just to tell you, that just goes to show you, the draft hasn't changed all that much. But
It's
yeah,
amazing.
you get a
Teams
guy
would
like that, you
take
just don't really know what to do with a guy like Jamie Arnold. But you could get to the end of
yeah.
the spring here, and it's like, man, like look what Arnold did. He pounded the strike zone. He walked 9 guys all year or whatever, right? And now you're like, if you don't take him 1, 2, or 3, what are you doing?
Yep.
By the way I looked at the Lincecum thing, I became pretty close with a guy that was scouting with the Padres at the time, and he was like, "Look, one of the knocks on Lincecum is like we don't have anybody to compare him to, so we're thinking the body's going to break down, his arm's going to break down. He's 165 pounds wringing wet, right? We don't have anybody to compare him to, and we think he's just going to blow out like at 27, 28 years old." And my thought was, okay, and you're not drafting him
Yeah.
necessarily to be on your club at 28 years old. What do you get out of
That's
him
just
for
your
6 or 7 years, right?
that's just your control years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, the Jamie Arnold thing is really interesting when it comes to that. So, um, yeah, the top 5. So, is there, like you mentioned, wouldn't surprise you if Laviolette like fell out of the top
Mhm.
5. Is there someone that's not in your top 10 right now that kind of I'm going to ask you a very high school prospect, similar question about high school prospects here in a second, but is there a college player that kind of has that helium, so to speak, that's
Mm.
not in the top 10 right now, but could get all the way up maybe into the top 5? Somebody that maybe is a 5-tool guy or has that big power tool at the plate, or you want him to see more, throw more strikes, and if he does, maybe the Brody Brecht sort of thing, like if he has a good year with command and control, he really shoots up the boards. There's someone like that right now on your board?
Yeah. Yeah, let me give you 2, and I'm gonna give you an arm, and I'm gonna give you a bat.
Mm.
I'll start with the bat. The guy that I'll be really interested to see this spring is Merrick Houston, the shortstop at Wake Forest. He's apparently he's put on 10 to 12 pounds, and he's producing greater bat speed, and he doesn't seem to have lost a step at shortstop. I mean, I guess the question then begs, like, how different is this a profile than what Dansby Swanson was at
Mhm.
Vanderbilt?
Mhm.
And if you can make that case, even though baseball has hedged even further toward exit velos, if you can make the case that Merrick Houston is going to develop into average bat speed, I think he's as good a bet as anybody
Hmm.
to be a top 10 pick. On the arm side, we talk about Bremner, we talk about Jamie Arnold, and then there's a cliff. And with how unorthodox Arnold is, I think there's a real gap there for another arm to step in and become a top 10 arm. The guy that I kind of have been circling is Kyson Witherspoon at Oklahoma. A little bit
Mhm.
undersized, 6'1", but athletic. He's well built. He was up to 99 in the fall with an 88-mile-an-hour breaking ball and a changeup that he can use. And he throws a ton of strikes. He's ultra athletic. I think there is an opportunity in this class for an arm to jump up into that range because, as you know, as I know, there are just scouting directors that would prefer to take college pitching in every single draft, regardless of where
Mhm.
they're selecting,
Yeah.
right? And outside of Bremner and Arnold, is Witherspoon going to make that jump? Is Matt Scott at Stanford going to make that jump? Is AJ Russell healthy enough at
Mhm.
Tennessee to make a jump like that? I just think someone's going to fill that gap, and Witherspoon's as good a bet as anybody.
You mentioned he was undersized, but isn't he like 210? So it's just height we're
Right.
talking about here. It's
6'1",
just
210.
we're just thinking about release point and angles and things like that. Yeah. So interesting. He's a Florida kid, I believe.
Yep. I think he started at Northwest Florida College and transferred in
Mhm.
to Oklahoma,
Ah,
and he's got a
yes.
twin brother.
The small college, the JC. We're going to talk a lot of JUCO baseball. I think
Hmm.
we're going to talk about a lot of players there and a lot of JUCO baseball on this show in the coming weeks, months, and years. Because and maybe we'll talk about that next time too. JUCO baseball is going to grow. It's already starting. It's going to grow. We're going to see it on ESPN on a regular basis at some point in the next couple of years because it's just going to be huge. So we'll save that for another day. But interesting there. So my second question, I'll let you get at it. I think the top of the prep class of 2025 is really interesting. You mentioned Billy Carlson at number 5 on one of your boards. But because they're high schoolers, they come with a lot of inherent risk, right? They're high school, they're 17, 18-year-old
Yep.
kids.
Yep.
There's more time for them to get hurt. There's more time for them to develop bad habits. There's more time for, all kinds of things to go wrong. And there's more, they have more distance to go before they get to a certain point. But in terms of how their stock changes between now and July, and as well as again, the volatility with the 18-year-old athlete, I'm curious which one, and maybe I've already answered that question now, which one of those high school prospects kind of has the best chance to land in the top 5. So they have to have some ceiling there, and I'm talking about merit alone, like ignore like the under slot plays, like somebody at 4,
Yeah.
5, 6, or
Yeah.
7 might grab a guy, save $1 million, $1.5 million or whatever. But who's that one guy at the prep level that kind of stands out in this way? Like if things go right for him, like he could go in that top 5. Is that Carlson? Is it
Gotta be.
Willits? Is it Holiday? You think Carlson's probably the top guy?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guys that get selected in the top 5 are guys that are going to play up the middle of the field, and it's kind of been
Mhm.
one of my reservations with Holiday this whole time. Is there's a lot of people who believe he's destined for third base, and if he's
Mhm.
destined for third base, it's hard to take a high school third baseman in the top 5 picks.
Mhm.
Now, it is a quote unquote down year in terms of like impact at the top, and maybe that changes things, especially with Colorado picking 4. There's I don't want to say nepotism, but there's lineage there in Colorado with the
Sure,
Holiday family.
sure.
So
They
that makes
know
some
him.
sense, but they
They know
know
the
him. They know
family.
the
Mhm.
family. Yeah. But Billy Carlson is a potential 5-tool shortstop. He can run. He can really pick it. Plus arm strength. He's got some
Mhm.
power. He's got a good frame. Obviously, a Southern California shortstop. They are constantly in demand. You brought up Willits. I like Willits a lot, but the question with Willits is going to be, does he do any one thing particularly well enough to uh, make him an impact player, or is he
Mhm.
just going to be a guy that does a lot of things well, nothing exceptionally well?
Mhm.
He does have the fact that he's going to be 17 and a half years old on the draft. That didn't work
Mhm.
out actually all that great for Cam Collier. That didn't push him, into the top 5 like a lot of people thought he was going to in
Mhm.
the 2022 draft. So Willits is just going to have to get so much stronger going into the spring to, I think, necessitate a pick inside of the top 5. I'll give you one more, and it's a guy that I just hear talked about a lot lately, and that's Gavin Feen. He is a high school third baseman, but Feen is also maybe your best bet in this class for a 6-hit, 6-power bat. Shades of Jordan Walker from, I think that was 2021. But Jordan Walker at that point was a first baseman, and he went 20th. Gavin Feen is going to play third base or maybe right field at the next level. And I think you can always sell a scouting director on a potential 6-hit, 6-power bat inside the top 5, top 10
Yeah,
picks.
I think the only thing there that you'd change about him if you could is, can we flip him around to bat from the left side? That might be the
Without
only thing.
question.
6'2", 200 pounds, athletic enough, arm to play third, 6-hit, 6-power. Yeah, you're gonna jump all over
A lot
that.
of some Longoria comps. You brought up Evan Longoria. I've heard Evan Longoria's name thrown around for Gavin Feen, and Longoria. Where did Longoria go? Wasn't he 1-1?
He was the third pick.
Third pick.
It was
Yeah,
that draft we were just talking about. He was the third pick in that draft. Yeah, behind
Yep.
Reynolds.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I mean, it exists, and Longoria was always going to be a third baseman. So we'll see.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did you maybe I'm dreaming here. Maybe I had a dream that you spoke to Gavin Feen recently.
I did.
Did
He
you
was on
mention
the
that?
FSS Plus MLB Draft Show.
There you
Check
go.
it out.
Head to YouTube
Free
and
of
check out the
charge.
draft show. You've had a bunch of the top 15 or so
Yeah.
far. What was the most interesting of those conversations for you? I mean, they're all probably good. You get a chance to talk to these kids, even the high school kids. What was the most fun one for you so far?
Yeah, I do genuinely believe Gavin Feen was probably the most impressive. He is wired like a 25-year-old pro. He's got it all figured out between the ears, and I don't know if he's on the Mount Rushmore. I've done like 250 of them over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 years now. He's probably in the top 10 or 15 most impressive.
Wow.
So go
Wow,
check him out.
And you knocked him
go
out
check him out.
in the winter, like before the season even. Yeah, wow.
I will say we've brought up Tyler Brebner quite a bit too, and he's probably been the most introspective player, where he kind of understands who he is, his surroundings, what he's gone through, just where he fits, where he's comfortable, and he was not short for words. So, Bremner's talked about a lot inside the top 5 picks. He's an ultra interesting listen to.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, just go find Future Star Series on YouTube, and you'll find the MLB Draft Show with Joe Doyle and a ton of draft prospects over the last couple of years, including a bunch already. What are you, about 15 deep already for this year's class, something like that?
Yeah, 15 or 16 deep.
15,
I think I've
16
done,
deep.
like you said, like 15 or 16 of the top 20. So.
Right. Interesting. Anybody you haven't gotten yet that you're looking to get your hands on?
There's one guy.
Yeah.
There's Ethan Holiday hasn't agreed to the show yet. I've talked to him. I've talked to his representation. We'll see if we can make it happen. But
it's a strategic thing, and we understand. We certainly understand that sort of thing.
When you come from that sort of family and you got a lot of attention on you, I can understand that you want the narrative to be a bit more controlled.
Sure. I totally get it. He's learning from his pops.
I'm also like the only person in the industry to have him not 1, and I have him like 8. So
right. Yeah. Maybe that's got a little something to do with it.
I might have bit the hand that feeds
at this point, but maybe so. But you got to evaluate the way you see it. So Billy Carlson and Gavin Feen stand out most for you there. So I know there's questions that you get quite a bit that you anticipate this time of year that we haven't touched on. What are a couple of things that you like the audience, you want fans to kind of understand about the process in general, the time of year, January, February, March, or this class in particular, even as we get closer to the D1 season starting and draft season kind of officially getting underway?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm looking to see how the question is answered is, Xavier Nyans up here in Mount Vernon, Washington, and Ethan Holiday in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Both of them left question marks on their profiles last summer. Whether it was passivity in the box, swing and miss, what have you. Neither one of those two players, for different reasons, is partaking in early preseason tournaments in California. So I question, how are they going to make their profiles stand out in just league play? Nines is going to see 82 to 86 most
Right.
nights
Yeah.
in a cold climate, northern Washington.
Yeah.
And then Holiday, Stillwater baseball isn't the most, Jackson Holiday broke the state record for home runs with like 18 in a 27 game season. Could he break that record? Does he need to break that record? Like, what sort of a spring does he need to have to jet set himself back up into my top 5? So that's a question that I'm asking. And I want to kind of throw that back on you. If you're evaluating draft talent and you've been going to high school games as long as I have, 20, 25 years, longer really, is that a red flag for you? Is it a yellow flag for you?
That
Does
they're
what they
not
do in the
playing in the
spring matter?
It's a good question. It's got to matter. It's got to matter because it's the latest information we have, and it's the latest information we have by several months, right? I can't just go by last summer, because if we did that, we'd be done. The conversation we've just had, that'd be it. Like, Bremner or Laviolette or Arnold would be number 1. The other 2 would go 2 and 3. Like, we wouldn't really have questions, but it never ends that way. It never, ever, ever stays the same. And there are reasons for that. And when the player that a team takes gets basically slot, give or take 10%, that was the best player available pick for the most part. And if that doesn't go, if that looks completely different than most boards looked, in January and February and March, the spring mattered, right? It's got to matter. It absolutely has to matter. And the big thing that I've been kind of preaching for forever, to fan bases is that kid, 16, 17, 18 years old, is going to change more physically between 16 and 20 years old, the years entering their draft years. Like, you're 16, 17, entering your senior year in high school. You're 20, 21, entering your most likely your draft eligible year in college, unless you're a JUCO kid or especially young. You change more those years and in between those years. So if that spring, and we're really talking about, December, through March, April, May, even into June, sometimes for some of the college kids, that's the latest look I have at him physically. That's the latest look I have at him, from just a production and performance standpoint. It has to matter. Does it have to be overwhelming? Like, if you have a bad spring, does it have to mean you fall big? It doesn't have to, but it usually does, doesn't it? Yeah. Guy has a rough spring, just didn't perform, goes out in his high school season and hits 355 instead of 700. It's going to hurt, right? It's going to hurt, pretty big, because now there are questions that there shouldn't be. It's really interesting with someone like Nyans, who plays in the North, because a lot of the same questions went out to Mike Trout and back in 2009. And when you redraft the 2009 draft, I mean, it's really easy. Trout goes 1, but it's also really easy to see why he didn't go top 5 or 10 back in 2009. He's in New Jersey. They weren't playing 50 games. And didn't get an opportunity, just like what you're saying, didn't get an opportunity really to face good competition. I mean, I've retold the story. I'm not even the originator of the story, but I've retold the story about how the Arizona Diamondbacks sent their scouting director to see Trout. He was scheduled to see him 2 days in a row. The first day he went like 1 for 2 with a couple of walks. And the next day the games got washed due to rain, and Arizona never went back to see him. Yep. And they passed on him twice in the first round. I believe in that draft, they took AJ Pollock and they took Bobby Borchering, a left-handed hitting first base, third base prep player that never reached the big leagues. I mean, Pollock had a pretty good career, but it'd been nice if they'd have seen, Mike Trout for 4 to 8 more plate appearances, right? Give him a chance. And they didn't even consider him because they only saw him once and they gave it. That happens though. That happens in the North quite a bit. You just don't get that opportunity. And even when you do, what did you just watch? You watched a man-child hit 83-mile-an-hour fastballs, 390 feet.
In March, we don't need to do too much of a proximal bias on this, but it's like March 16th, March 17th, Mount Vernon High School is coming down to Edmonds, and Puyallup is going up to Edmonds for a one-on-one.
That's about as good as it gets. Yeah.
I think guys like Mason Pike at Puyallup and Xavier Nines at Mount Vernon need to be praying that the sun is out,
Yeah.
because there could be $500,000 on the line with the amount of heat that will be in on that game. I'm assuming that the way that they're going to try and set that up is Pike throws in that game where where Xavier Nines is hitting, and
Right.
I would just be very, very surprised if it didn't line up that way. And if that is the case, I mean, there might be 10 scouting directors in the Pacific Northwest bouncing up and down between Cruz Schoolcraft, Slater DeBruin, and then that game. Yeah, that's going to be a hot one, but should be interesting.
And there's not a great chance, Joe. You know this. We've both grown up in the same area. There's not a great chance that it's sunny that day.
I have gone over the last 2 years, physically gone to 6 Puyallup High School baseball games, and I've watched 2 baseball games.
Yeah. Your washout percentage is pretty darn high.
Pretty high.
Wouldn't you love to go 4 for 6? Yeah, I'd love to go 4 for 6.
I'd love to live in Arizona where I go 6 for 6, and the only danger is it's too hot.
And it does get too high. You know me and heat, dude. Like, 100 degrees, not for Churchill. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It'll be no, but to answer your question, how Xavier Nines, how Ethan Holiday, how some of these guys that maybe struggled a little bit last summer, and maybe struggle isn't a fair word, but left question marks on their profile, how those guys are going to rectify some of those question marks to scouting directors in league play this year.
And when they do that, and there's still questions, pretty significant questions, that puts a big strain on the scouting department, not the analytics portion of it, not the data that they're collecting and analyzing, but the actual scouts to say, you know what, though, like, he's not going to have a problem hitting velocity. And if you can come to that conclusion because you have the eyeballs in your building, scouts still matter, right? We're kind of getting back around just a tiny bit to eyeballs matter.
Some organizations,
they're like eyeballs matter. So that's when you got to have the eyeballs that can help you out. Because imagine passing on someone like that for that reason, and then they turn out to be exactly what people thought he could be. You don't want to be that club either. The Mike Trout thing just wasn't anybody's fault. That's just the way it is. The same thing could be for Holiday. And I feel like, though, with Holiday, there's a pretty high floor in terms of where he gets drafted, just because of the bloodlines and stuff like I'd be absolutely shocked if he didn't go in round 1, almost no matter what the spring looks like.
I'd be surprised if he didn't go in the top 15, to be honest with you, just because the opportunities that he's going to have at Stillwater. I mean, unless he's totally overmatched, which seems unlikely. Boris and his family will probably position him to be in a good situation.
Yeah. And there's a lot of there is something to that, having bloodlines too. Like, you've seen it, what it takes. A family that's done it. Your dad did it. Your brother's now in the big leagues. It's there. You have experience. You have experience experiencing it in that.
Where do the Blue Jays pick?
Are you thinking the Blue Jays?
The floor. That's the floor.
Oh, you think the Blue Jays are the floor? They're what? 8,
15?
8?
Are they that high?
I think they're up. Yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah, they're 8. So it's Washington, Angels, Seattle, Colorado, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Miami, Toronto, and then Cincinnati, White Sox, Oakland.
Yeah. I mean, Chicago, the White Sox, I mocked him to the White Sox in the first mock draft after the lottery.
Right.
I think he fits the Cincinnati profile perfectly, especially with Great American Ballpark. Holiday is not going to fall far, because at the end of the day, it's a high school hitter with arguably 70 grade raw power from the left side.
Right.
Those guys just get picked.
Give me really quick. I want to talk about one other thing, but really quick before we get there. Essentially, in Nines and Holiday, there's some similarities there, right? Left-handed, right? You get third base. Both of them are probably third baseman, right? Power driven to some extent, right? Comparing them athletically, I don't exactly know where that lands at this point, but very, very similar in a lot of ways. What are the biggest differences between the two of them from a tools standpoint?
Man, that's a good question. I would say the biggest difference that you can notice if you sit in on 2 games for each of them is Ethan Holiday has a chance to play shortstop. They both have elite frames. I mean, Like Xavier Nines right now looks like an Amazon box. Like Amazon just shipped a television to your neighbor's house
Yeah.
and he's standing outside in it. Um, Xavier Nines looks really cut.
Mm,
But I would say that Holiday is a little bit longer in the levers. He's a
mhm,
more fluid shortstop, more
mhm.
athletic shortstop. They both have plus arm strength. Yeah, I would say the biggest difference is they're so similar. Is that Holiday just has a better
Just a
chance
just little
to
better
play up the
feet,
middle, little better
little better
feet,
action, little better
little better,
athleticism with the feet.
little
Yeah.
better first
Okay.
step, little
Yeah.
longer range. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like doing that. I like looking at the draft, finding players that there's a lot similar about the profiles. What's the difference? Why does one guy go 7 and one guy goes 24 or something? You know?
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, it's not like Ethan Holiday is some distinguished athlete. Like they're both average runners. Neither
Mhm,
one of them is gonna steal a bunch of bags.
mhm,
It's just he is a little bit softer up the middle,
mhm.
and that could get
You
him
see a lot of
selected
shortstops in the
earlier.
big leagues that are like that, that are really not that great of athlete. You know, they're not 60 runners.
Corey Seager,
Yeah, JP Crawford, who's
sure.
who's who's very sure-handed and at times has been very, very good defensively, but he's limited from a
Mhm.
speed and athleticism standpoint. But you're playing him at shortstop because he's going to field everything. I mean, yeah, there's certainly Corey Seager. But if Corey Seager didn't hit as much, where would he play? Second,
You
third?
mean
If
like
he
just
didn't, if
his ability to
yeah,
impact?
I feel like he's playing shortstop mostly his entire career so far, mostly because we're just going to put up with any negatives we get from him defensively. And that if he was a 270, 18 homer guy, he'd probably be playing second base at this point.
Maybe. I mean, JP Crawford played shortstop as that player.
Yeah, I just think they
You
look at
know?
where he's been. Like if he was like if Seager was 80%, 90% the hitter that Semien is, would
Yeah,
Semien
you
be
could
playing
make a case
shortstop?
that Simeon is the shortstop.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And,
It's
credit
weird how
to
that works
Holiday,
out.
credit to Nyans. Corey Seager, scouts have been saying since he was a high school junior,
Mhm.
when does it move? When does it come off the position? And he hasn't been a particularly good shortstop for quite a while now,
Right.
but it's just such a good bat. And I think that's kind of what you have to dream on
And
with
he doesn't
these
make a lot of
guys.
mistakes. Yeah, he doesn't make a lot
No,
of mistakes. Yeah,
the
so
routine
until it happens,
play is worth a lot
it
in
matters.
today's day and
It's
age.
the late career Cal Ripken conversation, you
There you
know?
go.
Yeah, and it took a while for them to shove him over to third base. So anyway, all right, one more thing really quick. We learned this week, um, and we'll be quick with this, but practice limits are changing at the college level, which are a big deal. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, you have 3 weeks exactly to have 18 practices, 21 days to have 18 practices. That's going up pretty significantly, Joe. Uh, is it 27 practices in 35 days
Yep.
that
That's the new
teams
one.
schools are
I
going
mean,
to
it's
have now?
doubled, man.
Yeah,
It's
talk
huge.
about how big that is for colleges, all across the country. It's
Yeah.
obviously a big deal, but what happens during that extra time? Like, how big of a deal is that?
Well, look at spring training for Major League Baseball. I mean, these guys get 6 or 7 weeks, 7
Mhm,
weeks if you're a pitcher to ramp up, be ready for opening day. And those guys are still getting hurt in spring
mhm,
training because they don't take their winters seriously. The same can and should be said about college pitchers. Some of them don't throw throughout the winter. And that's not because they're not taught, but it's because they don't have the drive. They're not getting paid, they don't have
mhm.
the
They're 19
motivation.
years old. They're
They're
going to do
dumb.
things that 19-year-old. Yeah,
They're
they
dumb.
just don't really know any better yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and so expecting these guys to get their arm ready in 3 weeks for opening day on February 17th or whenever it is just not fair. And that's why you see so many of these guys pop in early March and late February
Yeah.
and in early February during the ramp up stage. So, upping that to 6 weeks, giving them 27 practices
Mhm.
rather than 18 practices, it's going to be huge. And even if it saves, 4 or 5 arms a year, I think it's long overdue.
I also think that makes these players easier to scout. That
Yeah.
there's less of, well, I mean, he's probably only taken 400 swings, you know. Like, what was he doing? Was he in the cage maybe in January, in December and January at back home or whatever?
Mhm.
Sure. But now that they get that additional structure, maybe performance is better. Maybe it's a little bit more reliable of an environment to see players, even in the North. We've done this every year. We freeze our butt off in the Northwest, going to see UW play UCLA or something like that. And a lot of times what you see is good players perform at about 75% of where they're going to be. And it's not really just about velocity, but even hitters, it's harder to hit in the cold. Ball doesn't travel, pitch inside. They don't want to swing. But I think more practices eliminates at least a little bit of that as well. You're going to see, arms are looser. You're going to see hitters are more ready. I like it. It's a no-brainer. I'm just wondering why in the world did it take until 2025 to do it? Like, what was getting in the way there?
Yeah, student athletes' rights. Can't take up too much of their time.
Absolutely
type
crazy.
of deal. But I mean, so many of these kids were getting hurt. This
Yeah.
should have been, especially with baseball turning into how hard can you throw? This is how much we'll pay you.
Yeah.
And it's a trickle down. Like, this should have been in effect 8 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What's coming up for you at FSS Plus, FutureStarsSeries.com over about the next month or so? What should we be looking forward to?
Yeah. So we're going to get the MLK tournament this weekend. We're going to get Area Code Select West right after that. We're going to get Florida baseball going. And with all of that comes the very first, we'll call it the preseason 2025 MLB draft board. I always, right before opening day in college baseball, I drop my top 300. Every single one of those guys will have scouting reports, demographic information, blah, 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 blah. That'll come, I believe, on February 4th or 5th when I get home. And then it's go time. Then we start talking about, pieces reporting data, outliers, guys that have obviously seen massive jumps from what they were in 2025, some sleepers, some gems. And along the way, we're going to update the 2026 board with guys in college that have taken a jump. And we also probably in late April, and this is a ways away, I understand, we'll put out the first 2027 rankings. Right now we have 101 players to know that didn't get drafted or didn't get signed. But once we have 2 months of data on some of these guys, we'll put out our first board for that 2027 draft. So I'm always looking forward to that, researching and writing up fresh names.
Information driven. It's important.
Always.
It's important that it's about the information. One thing I'm going to do over the next month or so is I put out a redraft of the 2018 class. I'm going to do that for 2019 coming up. And it takes a while. So it's probably going to be 3 weeks before I get that out. But I have a little format. We had a little fun. And Jaron Duran was the number 1 pick in the redraft in 2018.
Jaron Duran,
rounder. Crazy. I was like, how do I put Jaron Duran there? He's had one great year. How do I do that? Like, look at all the control years, everything he does in center field, everything he does in the bases, everything he's been doing at the plate. It was impossible for me not to put Jaron Duran number 1. It was crazy. And it's mostly wins above replacement driven as well. But control years matter. How much money they're making matters. All else equal. If they sign an extension and they're in their extension period, that's a different story. But we did 2018, so we're not there yet, and 2019 won't be there either. When we get back and start doing like 12 and 13 and 14, yeah, that's a different conversation, right? That's a different conversation.
That's a bummer.
Some of those drafts were, man, they were rough. Yeah, some of those drafts were rough. Some of the high school kids picked in the top 15 in those drafts barely sniffed the big leagues or petered out in AA. I mean, man, that doesn't happen as much anymore. But we'll do a redraft and then spring training. I'm going to be down there in March, but that's what you're going to get from me over the next month or so. I'll work on that redraft and get that.
Hey, sidebar. Did you see my tweet the other day about the 2016 draft being technically the most successful draft? Have you gone back and looked at that class?
Yeah.
Woof.
Yeah. Right. Ouch.
27 big leaguers in the first round and nobody to write home about. Pretty nuts, man.
Pretty crazy. Who was the number 1 pick that year? Because Lewis was Moniak, yeah. But Nick Senzel was second.
Yeah.
So you had a high school center fielder go 1-1, and then essentially a third baseman, who turned into kind of a utility guy.
Where'd Senzel go to school? It was like Wright State, or it was a small school.
Tennessee is where he came out.
Oh, was it Tennessee?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm mistaking Alec Boehm.
maybe.
Alec
And then
Bowman
you
was a full
get
school guy.
Ian Ballman ended up at Wichita State though.
Wichita State, not Wright
Yeah.
State. Yeah.
Yeah. Ian Anderson went third in that draft, and then Riley Pint. There we go with the high school guy.
Riley
Yeah.
Pint.
Yeah.
One of the best drinking game baseball players of all time.
even the college guys in that class. I mean, like Senzel, Corey Ray was the 5th pick.
Played in one game.
Yeah, like AJ Puck went to the bullpen, pretty quickly. Braxton Garrett, Cal Quantrill, just never really. Matt Manning's been hurt. Another prep arm. Zach Collins, the catcher, with the White Sox.
Tell you what, had Kyle Lewis not gotten hurt, he might have become the most valuable player to come out of that class.
Yeah, although maybe Josh Lowe.
He might already still be in the top 10.
We've already had a guy retire. We've already had a guy from that class get to the majors and then retire, and Alex Kirilloff.
I would argue that Kyle Lewis has also retired, but I hear you.
Sure, but that was but crazy.
Crazy.
He could have kept playing. I mean, Kyle Lewis was forced out because he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, man. It's 2016 feels like it was yesterday, and it's a good reminder of just how quickly all of us are expiring on this planet.
Tell me what you know about Hudson Potts. No, I'm kidding. The 24th pick in the 2016 draft.
He did not make the big leagues, and he bounced around quite a bit.
Carter Keyboom was in that class too, wasn't he? I think he was.
Carter Keyboom's most famous claim to fame is that his brother is now a very successful baseball agent.
That's Carter Keyboom's claim to fame, is that his brother is now an agent and good at it. Wow. Carter, if you're listening, and I know you're not, but you should, I apologize for my buddy Joe here. He's kind of a jerk sometimes.
I shoot from the hip.
You're kind of a jerk sometimes, but you're right. That's his claim to fame at this
the
point.
Keyboom family.
All right, so that's what's coming up on FSS Plus. Again, really quick, one more time. Let me pull this up. If you want to get 25% off an annual subscription at FSS Plus, futurestarseries.com, head to t.ly/FSS Plus. That's t.ly/FSS Plus. And as you're signing up, click the coupon link and type in the code DRAFT25, lowercase d, draft 25, get 25% off your first year at FSS Plus. That is a deal you're not going to be able to get for very long. Do it by the end of January, or you're SOL, as my pops used to. You forgot, you're late, you just SOL, man. Palms up, it's over. Pay full price. There you go. Pay full. Joe's worth it by himself, I will say that. But we're gonna have fun. So draft and develop. We're gonna talk draft, scouting, player development. I don't really know exactly what this is going to look like. I just know that the topics that we want to cover are pretty much everything except that 26-man roster in the big leagues. And we're going to have fun doing it. Now I got to get to work on that 2019 redraft, because it's going to take every ounce of free time I can possibly muster over like the next 3 weeks to get that
George Kirby year.
Yeah, that's the George Kirby year.
See how George Kirby and Alek Manoah line up in terms of value. It might be close. Right.
I go through the organic first round. I redraft the organic first round. So probably 30 picks, but occasionally, there'll only be 28 or 29. So I don't do the comp picks, but yeah, very, very interesting to see how this turns out.
Probably still Adley 1-1 would be my guess.
Possible. Yeah, possible. Especially since it's war driven for the most part.
Yeah.
So
that was fun, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do this again. We're gonna grab guests. That's gonna be our main thing. So there'll be a third voice on here talking about the amateur game, minor leaguers, scouting, player development, training players, things of that nature. So it's gonna be fun. For Joe Doyle, I'm Jason Churchill. This is Draft and Develop. We'll see you next time.